My sister scheduled her wedding on my graduation day. She got the attention she wanted, when no one showed up. I was the first person in my family to go to college. Not just college, but medical school. 8 years of absolute hell working 3 jobs while studying, living on ramen and 4 hours of sleep, missing every family vacation because I had exams or hospital rotations. My parents always said they were proud, but they never really understood why I put myself through it when I could have just gotten married, like my sister Rachel did at 19. Rachel dropped out of community college after 1 semester to marry her boyfriend Todd, who sold insurance. She spent the next 7 years having 3 kids and complaining about how hard her life was while I was pulling 36-hour shifts at the hospital. When I finally matched into my residency program, I called my family with my graduation date circled in red on my calendar, May 15th. I'd already bought my parents their plane tickets as a surprise. My mom cried on the phone saying she couldn't wait to see me walk across that stage. 2 weeks later, Rachel called me screaming with excitement about her news. She and Todd were renewing their vows for their 8th anniversary and having the big wedding they never got to have. The date? May 15th. I told her that was my graduation day, and she said I'd had plenty of graduations before, so missing one wouldn't kill me. When I reminded her this was medical school, not some random ceremony, she said I was being selfish, trying to make her change her date when she'd already put down deposits. She actually said my graduation was just a boring ceremony, but her wedding was a once-in-a-lifetime event. I asked her what about her first wedding, and she hung up on me. Rachel immediately called our parents crying about how I was trying to ruin her special day. She told them I demanded she change everything just so people would pay attention to me. She said I'd always been jealous of her beautiful family and was trying to sabotage her happiness. My mom called me disappointed, saying Rachel already paid for the venue, and it would be such a waste of money to change it. My dad said I could just get my diploma mailed to me. They chose her wedding. I said I understood completely and wished Rachel all the best. Then I got strategic. First, I called my extended family personally to let them know about my graduation. My aunts, uncles, cousins, and everyone who'd watched me struggle through school. I told them how much it would mean to have them there since this was such a huge accomplishment. Said that every single one of them already knew about Rachel's wedding, but when they heard it was the same day as me becoming a doctor, they all said they'd rather come to my graduation. My uncle, who paid for some of my textbooks, said he wouldn't miss seeing his investment pay off. My grandmother, whom Rachel was counting on to pay for the flowers, said she'd rather see her granddaughter become a doctor than watch Rachel get married again to the same man. Then I reached out to all our family friends, the ones who'd known us since we were kids. I told them how excited I was to finally be done after 8 years of sacrifice. They all picked my graduation. Even Rachel's own godmother said she'd already been to one of Rachel's and didn't need to see another. The best part was when I called Todd's parents. They'd always felt bad that they missed my white coat ceremony because of one of Rachel's tantrums. When they heard she scheduled her vow renewal over my medical school graduation, Todd's mom was furious. She said Rachel was selfish and they'd be at my graduation to support someone who actually accomplished something. 2 weeks before the big day, Rachel realized her guest list had shrunk from 150 to about 20 people. She called me sobbing, demanding I tell everyone to come to her wedding instead. I played dumb and said I thought she didn't want selfish people at her celebration anyway. She tried to get our parents to force people to choose her, but my mom was too embarrassed to call anyone after they'd already picked my graduation. Rachel had to call off the renewal because the venue required a minimum head count she couldn't meet. The week after Rachel canceled everything, my phone stayed quiet. No calls from my parents, no texts from Rachel, nothing. But my extended family kept reaching out, asking what time graduation started and where they should meet me afterward. My aunt called to say she was bringing my cousins, and they were all excited to see me walk across that stage. My uncle, who helped with textbooks, texted asking if I needed anything else before the big day. Every confirmation felt like a small win, but the silence from my immediate family sat heavy in my chest. My grandmother called on Thursday morning while I was making coffee in my tiny apartment. Her voice sounded different, sharper than usual. She told me she was bringing me something special for graduation, something that would make up for all the years my parents overlooked what I'd accomplished. She didn't say it directly, but I could hear the anger underneath her words. She was mad at them on my behalf, and knowing someone in my family actually saw how wrong this whole situation was made my throat tight. I spent most of my time in the medical school library that week, buried in textbooks and study guides for my final exams. The building was nearly empty since most students had already finished, but I liked the quiet. I could spread my materials across an entire table and not worry about disturbing anyone. I was reading about cardiac pathology when Delilah dropped into the chair across from me. She took one look at my face and asked what was wrong. I tried to brush it off, said I was just stressed about finals, but she kept staring at me with that look that meant she wasn't buying it. So I told her everything. About Rachel scheduling her vow renewal on my graduation day, about my parents choosing her wedding, about how I called everyone and Rachel's event got canceled. Delilah didn't say anything for a minute, just reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Then she told me her whole family was coming to my graduation now, because I deserved people who actually celebrated me. That's when I started crying, right there in the medical library, for the first time since this whole mess started. She hugged me across the table while I ugly cried into her shoulder and I realized I'd been holding everything in for weeks. 2 days later, my residency program director, Dr. Newell, called me into his office. My stomach dropped. I was sure I'd messed something up, missed a deadline, or failed some requirement I didn't know about. I walked down the hallway to his office with my heart pounding, running through everything I might have done wrong. But when I sat down, he smiled at me. He said the hospital staff had heard about my family situation through the grapevine, and they were planning something special for graduation day. I must have looked confused because he explained that everyone had been talking about how I worked 3 jobs while doing my rotations, how I never complained or asked for special treatment. He told me that watching me excel despite everything taught him more about dedication than any textbook ever could. I left his office feeling like maybe I had more support than I realized. Todd called me that evening, which shocked me because we'd never really talked one-on-one before. He was always just Rachel's husband in the background. He apologized for Rachel's behavior, said he tried to talk her out of picking May 15th, but she wouldn't listen. His voice sounded tired, worn down in a way I'd never heard before. Then he mentioned marriage counseling, almost like he didn't mean to say it out loud. That surprised me more than anything because Rachel always talked about their relationship like it was perfect, like they never fought or disagreed about anything. I realized their marriage might be struggling way more than anyone knew, and part of me felt bad for Todd even though he'd gone along with Rachel's plan. My mom texted me the next morning asking if we could talk. I read her message 3 times, looking for an actual apology or acknowledgement of what she'd done. But the whole text focused on how hurt Rachel was, how she was crying every day, how the cancellation embarrassed her in front of everyone. Nothing about me. Nothing about my graduation or how she'd dismissed 8 years of work. I waited a few hours before responding, then typed out a short message saying I was happy to talk after graduation when I had more time. I hit send and felt something shift inside me. She didn't text back right away, and when she finally did, it was just a simple okay. She knew she had no leverage anymore, nothing to bargain with. 3 days before graduation, my uncle took me to dinner at a nice Italian place downtown. We talked about my residency placement and what specialty I wanted to pursue. Then he pulled an envelope out of his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. I opened it and saw a check for the exact amount of my remaining student loan balance from my final semester. My hands started shaking. He told me that watching me succeed despite my parents' lack of support reminded him of putting himself through school years ago. He said he was proud to help me start my medical career without that debt hanging over me. I tried to argue, said it was too much, but he waved me off and told me to just accept the gift. I hugged him in the parking lot afterward and couldn't stop saying thank you. Rachel posted something on social media the next day. I saw it when I checked my phone between study sessions. She wrote this long thing about how family betrayal hurt worse than anything, how people who were supposed to love you could turn their backs when you needed them most. She was clearly trying to make herself look like the victim, painting me as the bad guy who ruined her special day. I scrolled through the comments and watched her plan backfire in real time. Person after person congratulated me on medical school instead of sympathizing with her. Even some of her own friends pointed out that scheduling over someone's medical school graduation was selfish. One of her college roommates wrote that Rachel should have known better. I checked back 2 hours later and the whole post was gone. She'd deleted it. Delilah's mom, Christina, called me that afternoon and invited me to their house for dinner before graduation. She said she wanted to do something special since my own family wasn't stepping up. When I got to their house that evening, the whole Garrison family was there. Christina, her husband Roman, Delilah, and her sister Riley. They'd made my favorite foods and bought a cake that said congratulations. Christina hugged me at the door like I was one of her own kids. During dinner, she told me about her own sister who always competed with her accomplishments, who tried to overshadow every good thing that happened to Christina. She said sometimes the family you choose matters more than the family you're born into. Roman nodded and added that blood doesn't automatically mean loyalty. Sitting at their table, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about my success, I felt less alone than I had in weeks. My dad called the day before graduation. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. He apologized, actually said the words, "I'm sorry," and admitted they got caught up in Rachel's drama without thinking about how much my achievement meant. His apology sounded real, like he genuinely felt bad about what happened. But then he started making excuses, saying Rachel was emotional and they were just trying to support both daughters equally. I told him I accepted his apology and I meant it, but I also knew things between us had changed in a way that couldn't be undone. He seemed to understand that because he got quiet for a minute before saying he loved me and hoped I had a great graduation day. My grandmother arrived in town that evening and immediately insisted on taking me shopping for a celebration outfit. She wanted me to look amazing for the graduation dinner afterward. We went to a nice department store and she picked out this beautiful dress that I never would have bought for myself. While we were at the register, she pulled another envelope from her purse. She told me she'd been saving money specifically for this moment, that she wanted me to have something for my future that I could use however I wanted without feeling guilty. I opened the envelope in the car and the amount inside made me stop breathing for a second. It was enough to cover my security deposit and first month's rent for an apartment near the hospital where I'd be doing my residency. My grandmother squeezed my hand and told me I'd earned every bit of it through sheer determination, and she was proud to help me start this new chapter of my life. The morning of May 15th arrived with sunlight streaming through my apartment window. I woke up without the heavy weight in my chest that I'd been carrying for weeks. My phone showed a text from Delilah saying she'd pick me up in an hour. I got out of bed and pulled my graduation gown from the closet where it had been hanging since I picked it up last week. The dark blue fabric felt smooth under my fingers. I laid it across my bed and started getting ready, taking my time with my hair and makeup in a way I hadn't bothered with during most of medical school. My doorbell rang exactly when Delilah said it would. She came in carrying a bag from the coffee shop we liked and handed me my usual order. She looked at my gown hanging on the back of my door and smiled. We sat at my small kitchen table drinking our coffee while she told me about her parents arguing over what time they needed to leave to get good seats. Her mom wanted to leave 2 hours early. Her dad thought 1 hour was plenty. They compromised on 90 minutes. Delilah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She said her parents had been talking about me all week, how excited they were to watch me graduate. She paused and then added that they already thought of me as their bonus daughter after all the time I'd spent at their house over the years. Something in my throat got tight when she said that. I realized I'd built something real during these 8 years, something that went beyond just getting through school. These people had become my family in ways my actual family never managed. We drove to campus together with the windows down and music playing. The parking lot was already filling up when we got there. Graduates in blue gowns walked toward the auditorium in small groups. I saw people I'd spent countless hours with in study groups and hospital rotations. We found our assigned spots in the staging area behind the auditorium. The dean's assistant checked our names off a list and handed us our programs. I opened mine and ran my finger down the list of names until I found my own. Seeing it printed there made everything feel suddenly real. Delilah stood next to me adjusting her cap and talking about the party her parents were planning for after. The ceremony coordinator started organizing us into alphabetical order. I ended up between two people I barely knew from different rotation schedules. The music started and we began filing into the auditorium. The lights were bright and I could hear people talking in the audience. We walked down the center aisle in 2 lines. I kept my eyes straight ahead at first, but then I couldn't help looking out at the seats. My grandmother sat in the front row wearing the purple dress she'd bought specifically for today. My uncle sat next to her with his wife. Todd's parents were 3 seats down. I saw my aunt and 2 of my cousins. The entire Garrison family took up 2 full rows on the left side. Christina caught my eye and waved. Behind them, I spotted several people from the hospital, including 3 nurses I'd worked with during my surgery rotation. They were still in their scrubs, probably on break between shifts. I scanned the rest of the crowd and saw more familiar faces. Extended family members I'd called weeks ago. Family friends who'd known me since I was little. The support in that room felt bigger than I'd expected. When they called my name, I walked across the stage and took my diploma from the dean. The applause got loud. I looked out and saw my grandmother standing up, clapping harder than anyone else. Other people in the front rows stood too. The moment stretched out longer than it probably actually lasted. Every missed family vacation flashed through my mind. Every night I'd chosen studying over sleep. Every time my parents suggested I should just get married instead. All of it led to this stage, this diploma, this applause from people who actually understood what I'd accomplished. I walked back to my seat and sat down, holding the diploma folder in both hands. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of other names being called and more applause. When it ended, we all threw our caps in the air like you're supposed to. People started flooding toward the exits to find their families. I got swept along in the crowd until I made it outside where everyone was taking pictures. My grandmother found me first. She wrapped me in a hug that lasted several seconds and told me she'd never been prouder of anyone in her entire life. My uncle came up next and shook my hand formally before pulling me into a hug too. His wife dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. She said she always knew I'd make it despite my parents' lack of support. She didn't say it meanly, just stated it as a fact. Todd's mother was next. She hugged me and held on for a long moment. When she pulled back, she looked me in the eyes and said she was sorry my own mother wasn't here to see this, but she was honored to stand in. Her kindness cracked something in my careful composure. My eyes got wet and I had to blink several times. She squeezed my hand and smiled. The Garrison family surrounded me after that. Christina hugged me like I was one of her own kids. Roman patted my shoulder and told me I'd earned every bit of this. Riley took about 50 pictures on her phone. Delilah stood next to me grinning while her family made us pose together. We spent 20 minutes taking pictures with different combinations of people. My grandmother insisted on getting photos with just the 2 of us. My uncle wanted one with his whole family plus me. The hospital staff who'd come found me and congratulated me before heading back to their shifts. One of the nurses told me she'd specifically traded shifts so she could be here. The whole scene felt overwhelming in the best possible way. Christina announced that she'd made reservations at a nice Italian restaurant downtown for 6 o'clock. She'd reserved a private room in the back that could fit everyone. My grandmother said that sounded perfect. We agreed to meet there and everyone started heading to their cars. I rode with Delilah again. She turned the music up loud, and we sang along badly to songs we'd listened to during late-night study sessions. When we got to the restaurant, the private room was already set up with a long table that seated 20 people. Christina had ordered appetizers that were already on the table. Everyone found their seats and started passing plates around. The conversation got loud with multiple people talking at once. I sat between my grandmother and Delilah, right in the middle of all of it. Christina stood up after everyone had their food and tapped her glass with a fork. The room got quiet. She said she wanted to make a toast. She talked about how proud she was to watch me achieve my dreams through pure determination. She mentioned the late nights I'd spent studying at their house when I needed a quiet place to work. She said watching me never give up had taught her own daughters important lessons about following through on goals even when things got hard. Roman stood up next and added his own stories. He talked about finding me asleep at their kitchen table at 2 a.m. with textbooks spread everywhere. He said he'd never met anyone with as much focus and drive. My face felt hot while they talked. Everyone raised their glasses and drank. My grandmother reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. My phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out and saw 3 texts from my mom and 2 from my dad. They said they were proud and asked for pictures. My dad's message said he wished they could have been there. My mom said she hoped I had a wonderful day. I read them twice. The words felt empty after they'd missed the actual event. I selected a few photos from my camera roll and sent them without adding any message. My mom immediately responded with heart emojis. My dad called, but I let it go to voicemail. I put my phone back in my purse and picked up my fork. For the first time, maintaining distance from them felt completely okay. I didn't feel guilty or sad about it. They'd made their choice, and now I was making mine. Another text came through while I was eating. This one was from Rachel. It was long, filling up my entire screen when I opened it. She apologized and said she didn't realize how important this was to me. But then she spent 3 paragraphs explaining about wedding stress and feeling overlooked in the family. She said she'd been going through a hard time and made bad decisions. She hoped I could understand and forgive her. I read it twice. The apology was buried under so many justifications that it barely counted as one. I typed back a short response saying I appreciated the apology and hoped she was doing well. I didn't engage with her victim narrative or tell her everything was fine. I just acknowledged her message and left it at that. Then I put my phone on silent and focused on the people actually sitting around me. My grandmother stood up near the end of dinner. She tapped her glass and waited for everyone to look at her. She said she'd been thinking a lot lately about what family really meant. She said family was about showing up, about being there for the important moments, about supporting each other through hard times. She paused and looked around the table. She said she was updating her will to reflect who actually showed up for family. She didn't say my parents' names, but everyone knew who she meant. She turned to me and said I was getting her house when she passed because I was the one who visited her regularly and actually cared about her life. My uncle nodded in agreement. Several other people at the table murmured their support. I felt my eyes get wet again, but I smiled and thanked her. She sat back down and patted my arm. The restaurant door opened and I looked up to see Dr. Newell walking into our private room. He was still in his white coat from the hospital. He came over to my seat and congratulated me personally. He said the hospital was excited to have me start residency next month. He'd been impressed with my performance during rotations and thought I'd make an excellent physician. He mentioned that my ability to handle family drama while maintaining professional excellence showed the kind of character they wanted in their doctors. He stayed for about 10 minutes, chatting with different people at the table. My grandmother asked him questions about the residency program. Christina told him how proud they all were. When he left, he shook my hand again and told me he'd see me in 4 weeks. The dinner lasted another hour. People shared stories and laughed. My uncle told embarrassing stories about me as a kid. Delilah talked about our first day of medical school when we were both terrified. Riley mentioned the time I fell asleep during a study session and drooled on my textbook. The whole night felt warm and right. These were my people. This was my family. Not because we shared blood, but because they'd chosen to show up for me when it mattered. 2 weeks passed quickly. I moved into a small apartment near the hospital using the money my grandmother had given me. The space was tiny, but it was mine, and it was close enough to walk to work. My first day of residency started at 5 a.m. I showed up 15 minutes early and found 3 other residents already in the locker room changing into scrubs. We introduced ourselves and headed to morning rounds together. The attending physician ran us through the patient list and assigned us each to different cases. The work was intense from the first minute. I barely had time to think about anything except the tasks in front of me. During a rare break around midnight, I sat in the resident lounge with 2 of the other new residents. We were all exhausted. One of them mentioned her family didn't understand why she worked such crazy hours. Another one said his parents still asked when he was going to get a real job. I told them about my complicated family situation, about my sister scheduling her wedding on my graduation day. They both nodded like they understood completely. The first resident said her brother did something similar, trying to overshadow her acceptance to medical school. The other one talked about family members who'd stopped talking to him when he chose medicine over the family business. We sat there for 20 minutes sharing stories. I realized this experience was way more common than I'd thought. Medical school and residency came with sacrifices that not everyone understood or respected. But sitting in that lounge with people who got it, I felt less alone in it than I ever had before. The call from my mom came 3 weeks after graduation. She asked if we could meet for dinner to talk, and I could hear the careful way she picked her words. I agreed to meet them at a chain restaurant halfway between the hospital and their house. When I walked in, they were already sitting in a booth near the back, and my dad stood up like he wasn't sure if he should hug me. We ordered food and made small talk about the weather and my apartment until the server left. Then my mom started explaining how they'd been in a tough spot, wanting to support both their daughters. My dad said they thought I'd understand since I was always the responsible one. They talked about Rachel's deposits and how she'd been so excited about the wedding. My mom mentioned how embarrassed they felt when relatives asked why they weren't at my graduation. Every explanation sounded weak, even as they said it. I watched them squirm in their seats and realized they were more worried about how they looked to extended family than about how they'd made me feel. When they finished talking, I set down my fork and told them I forgave them. My mom's face lit up for a second before I kept going. I said our relationship would be different now because I couldn't rely on them the way I'd hoped to. I told them I needed people who showed up for me without having to be convinced, and that wasn't them. My mom started crying. My dad looked down at his plate with his jaw tight. Neither of them argued or tried to make excuses. I didn't reach across the table or tell them it was okay. I just sat there and let them sit with what I'd said. The rest of dinner was quiet. We talked about safe things like my grandmother's health and my uncle's new job. When we left, my mom hugged me and whispered that she was sorry. I hugged her back but didn't say anything else. Rachel's text came 2 weeks later asking if I wanted to get coffee. I almost said no, but something made me curious. We met at a shop near her house and she looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before. She ordered a latte and picked at the foam while we sat outside. She started talking about how hard things had been with Todd lately. She said he'd been distant since the wedding got canceled. Then she looked at me and said she'd been jealous of me for years. She admitted watching everyone pick my graduation over her wedding made her realize people thought she was selfish. She talked about feeling like she'd wasted her 20s while I was building something real. It was the most honest she'd ever been with me. She didn't fully apologize or take complete responsibility, but she came closer to real self-awareness than I'd ever seen from her. I told her I appreciated her being honest. We talked for another hour about her kids and my residency. It wasn't like we were suddenly close, but something shifted between us. When we left, she hugged me and said she was proud of me. I believed her. 3 months into residency, my life started feeling like it belonged to me. The Garrison family invited me to Sunday dinners every week, and Christina always made sure to cook something she knew I liked. My grandmother called me every few days just to chat about her garden or her book club. The other residents became my daily support system, people who understood the exhaustion and the excitement of what we were doing. My relationship with my parents stayed complicated. We talked on the phone every couple weeks, but there was a distance that hadn't been there before. Rachel and I texted sometimes about normal sister things. Nothing was perfect or fixed, but I didn't need it to be. I had people who genuinely celebrated my success. I had a career I'd worked 8 years to build. I had a family I'd chosen and who'd chosen me back. Standing in the hospital at 2 in the morning after saving someone's life, I felt genuinely happy with the doctor I'd become and the life I was building.